everyone. This will be part 4 of chapter 22 of Regular Boy Daniel Wayne, written by Diamond Rosie and read by Insect Overlord. October 16th, Wednesday, 6:49 p.m. Originally, Danny had wanted to go to the ice rink in Gotham Park on Monday when it opened, but upon learning that the park would only rent out used skates, Damien had vehemently refused to allow them on his feet, and they spent their time instead shopping for Damien's own pair of skates. Damien hadn't originally liked the design on most of the skates until Danny happened upon the exact ones he'd bought and pointed it out to Damien, who happened to be drawn to the same ones in just a different color. They ate out at a vegan place Steph recommended, since Alfred wasn't expecting them for dinner and got gelato after. Danny hadn't been too peeved about it and told Damien they could go to the ice rink today instead, since he had a group project he was supposed to meet up for yesterday. He brought his practice skates with him to the park and went to buy their tickets while he waited for Damien to get dropped off. Of course, nothing ever went smoothly for Danny. Just as he had been making his way to the ticket line, a volley of lasers was sent up around the perimeter, and a deep static echoed through the loudspeakers. Someone had hijacked the park. Who even hijacks a park? "Hello, afternoon goers," the voice said as the static subsided. "This is your favorite rogue here." He paused for dramatics. "That's right, the Riddler." The mics echoed with static again as the man cackled maniacally. "Looking at all of you going around and having your fun, I wondered why not have my own fun." The people in the park stood carefully still, not sure if it was even safe to run, many of them snapping on their gas masks preemptively. In his peripheral view, Danny caught a streak of yellow and another of black and red swinging by. "And it looks like my friends made it here just in time. Welcome, Signal, Robin." As the Riddler explained his genius game to the 100 of captives, Robin made his way from speaker to speaker, scanning the crowd. Danny assumed it was for henchmen or potential explosives, but to his surprise, Robin's search came to a conclusion on the speaker closest to Danny. He didn't acknowledge Danny throughout the non-exchange, and Danny probably would have chalked it up to coincidence if he hadn't known the boy under the mask. Signal had busied himself with corralling the civilians to a safe location away from the ice rink, which evidently had been made center stage by Mr. Riddler himself. The crowd had quickly thinned, and Danny couldn't think of a suitable excuse to not follow them. Signal seemed hesitant to approach Danny, and even Robin refused to look in his direction for more than passing glances. Mister," Signal finally had to bite, as Robin went to inspect for clues. "It's not safe for you here. You should evacuate with the others." There was a pause, and his hand went up to where his earpiece might be. "I'm sure your family, whoever they are worried about you, and your safety." Danny was about to speak, but Signal started again. "Not that I know them personally. I would assume that they were worried because I assumed that you have a loving, caring family, and loving, caring families don't keep secrets from each other. I mean, they're definitely very worried about you. Not that I asked, because that would be silly. Ha, so silly. You should go, though, random person who I definitely don't know." Danny decided to intervene for Signal's sake more than his. He said the clues were hidden on the ice. "I can skate." Danny held up his skates to show. "I can be fast, and I can definitely help you guys." "No," Signal said immediately. "They'll definitely kill me. I mean, it's too dangerous to involve a civilian." Danny frowned at that. "I'll be fine," already fastening the last belt of his skates. The Riddler was hardly a real threat to Danny, even with having to pretend to be fully human. "Do not overstep. This is out of your jurisdiction," Robin spoke up. "And you, what, have a warrant?" Danny asked. If it means that much to you, which neither of them could refute it, he offered up a sigh, noticing Signal deeply fretting the situation. "I do have another pair." He showed Damien's brand new skates with the tag still on them. "They're my brother's, and he doesn't like other people using his stuff, but I guess I'll make it up to him later." Robin's footing shifted slightly at the admission. If they fit. And they would. You can wear them for the time being. Damien had gone through the store's entire selection of ice skates before finally landing on the ones he'd liked. It had red stripes instead of Danny's blue. Robin was hesitant to accept the skates from Danny, but he relented and slipped them onto his feet. "It's such a coincidence that Robin happens to have the exact same size as your brother," Signal said loudly, a nervous laugh in his voice. "Your brother, who may possibly be scheduled to be here any second now. Not that Robin tried to stand up in his new skates and stumbled, and, Danny suspected purposefully, elbowed Signal right in the gut, effectively shutting him up. "Don't stray too far from me," Robin said in an authoritative tone, as they both made it onto the ice. "Shouldn't be a problem," Danny nodded, and then paused in thoughtfulness before turning to Robin in projected curiosity. "You do know how to skate, right?" he asked. Robin's head turn was only a little rigid. "I suppose it never came across in my training," he admitted quietly. "Really?" Danny feigned surprise. "My brother doesn't know how to skate either. You guys have a lot in common." Robin stayed silent, but followed Danny's prompts on how to skate as they found the clues on the ice while Signal searched everywhere else. Robin was quick to pick up the skill and was able to keep up with Danny's slowed pace as they searched. Danny was quick to catch Robin when he inevitably lost balance and made sure to keep the mood light with conversation and jokes, since Robin was clearly already tense. Robin and Danny had finished searching before Signal returned from his larger search. Waiting outside the rink, Danny collected Damien's skates from Robin while they waited for him. Robin had stayed a lot quieter than Danny knew Damien to be, but said quietly, "You speak of your brother often." Danny tilted his head. "I guess I did," he admitted easily. There was a thick silence before Robin spoke again. "You," he stated, a nervous edge in his voice that made Danny listen closely, "seem fond of him." "I am." The words left Danny without much thought. The speedy answer seemed to not be what Robin had been expecting, his head snapping at him and his eyes trying to decipher Danny's tells. "He's my brother," Danny shrugged, without any further details, unbothered by the heavy gaze on him. Robin blinked at him, body locked in place and any emotion hidden behind the whites of his domino mask. Signal landed softly in front of them, and once he shared his findings, the riddle was solved easily. A few short moments passed before the spots next to Danny, where the vigilantes had been only seconds earlier, were filled by Damien and Duke. "I didn't see you during the Riddler attack," Damien said in lieu of a greeting. "Are you hurt?" "No, I'm all right. Funny story, actually. You'll never guess who I just met." Danny pretended not to notice Duke squirm behind him, and quickly said that he had to leave to do something else. Damien and Danny were quick to get on the ice with a still thin crowd. "Whoa, Damien, I thought you said you didn't know how to skate," Danny complimented. "I don't," Damien answered defensively, and a little too insistently. Danny decided to ignore it. "You must be a natural, then. Come on," challenging Damien to go faster, knowing he would have to listen to Tucker to brief him on the internet's version of what went down during their bi-weekly FaceTimes. October 18th, Friday, 3:48 p.m. Tim arrived at the West Valor Stadium 30 minutes before either of the teams were due to arrive. The cleaning crew was finishing up, and he snuck past them onto the supply closet and picked out a discarded janitorial uniform. Hidden in plain sight, Tim made his way onto the stands the Foxes had been assigned. A few of his co-workers rushed him to finish up since the news crew would be setting up soon. Tim made quick work of the listening device he planted in the bench booth, prepping it for their comms frequency. Discarding the uniform, Tim left the stadium and waited at a nearby cafe until the others showed up. They all waited around the concessions area before going into the stands once everyone arrived. Since they had come in their civilian identities, per Tim's recommendation, it would make more sense for them to be seen arriving together than separately. Most hockey games lasted around 60 minutes, and then, assuming it took them 30 to get geared up, they'd still be able to make it to the site of their case in time. "Why'd you think the perp would be at a hockey game?" Dick asked, munching on some popcorn. Bruce waited expectantly for an answer next to him. Neither had caught on to Tim's scheme yet. Tim spoke before an annoyed Damien could expose him. "Keep your eye on number 17 on the Foxes team," he said, leading them to their seats. He'd waited to connect their comms after they'd realized who they actually came here for. It didn't take long before Dick's eyes widened in realization. Jason, Damien, and Steph had no reaction, already piecing together Tim's scheme the first night in the cave. Bruce, still none the wiser, watched the players skate around the ice, warming up as more of the crowd filtered in. He found the player wearing an orange and black 17 a second before the lettering for the name just above it. His head swiveled to Tim, demanding an explanation. Tim crossed his arms, keeping his voice low to not be overheard. "I said a POI would be here." He gestured vaguely to Danny. "I didn't say it was a POI for the case." He let that settle in before saying, "I wasn't going to let you guys blow him off for a second time," he said pointedly. I should've," Dick muttered to himself, guilt heavy on his features as Bruce sat rigid in his own seat. Tim supposed that he could understand where Dick had been coming from. If any of the rest of them had wanted the family to show up for them, which wasn't often, but not never, they would be loud and boisterous about it, demanding even, knowing their right to be supported despite whatever case may be brewing in the background. And when they received explanations or rationale on why someone couldn't make it, it was honest and had lives at stake, not obvious lies about business meetings and work. Even apart from that, Tim noticed how Danny assumed he was a +1 on their plans. In addition, that, while welcomed, wasn't always warranted. Tim had noticed because he knew what it was like. Bruce had been given everything he could have ever wanted growing up, just by mentioning it in passing, because everyone was always watching him, and they'd do anything to have his favor. Dick had gone from an only child buttered up in a circus to an only child buttered up by a country, the second coming of Bruce Wayne. Jason, while maybe not having the most attentive parents, had always been easy to declare when he wanted something. Damien grew up with the opposite problem to Danny and Tim, having more attention than would be healthy as the heir of the League of Assassins. Tim had to fight to get attention. He fought his way into Robin and fought his way into the Young Justice. Tim had fought and won, so he kept fighting. But Danny hadn't won enough to make him keep fighting. He didn't know there was something to fight for. Tim would just fight for him until Danny realized there was. That there were people who loved him and cared for him and wanted him to be happy, and wanted to be there and watch him be happy and do things that made him happy. This game was different from the other one Tim had gone to. The stadium was more than double in size, and all the seats were filled. The camera crew was also a new addition, as were the announcers that came with them. This game was clearly a bigger deal than the others had been, and that's probably why Danny had attempted to have them there. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Gotham's regional semifinals, where we find the hockey team that will be representing Gotham in the upcoming New Jersey State Championships. For the past 3 years, we've had matchups for the same teams in the semifinals, but it seems this year things are a little different." Tim hooked the others onto the listening device he planted in the stands, and the hushed voices of Danny's teammates filled their ears. "That's right, James. This year's lineup's been usurped by a new team, the Arctic Foxes, who knocked out the usual competition of the Gotham Bats in their very first qualifiers. And there have been a few interesting rumors going around about the Foxes and Wolves. Word on the street is that one of the Wolves Stars players was originally a player on the Foxes, and if my sources are right, it's the Wolves' new number 71, Blake Green." The crowd listened intently to the explanation. "But wouldn't that mean that the Foxes are down a player? How do they manage to get all the way up the semis then, Scott?" The large camera panned over to show off the teams. "Well, James, it seems like luck is on the Foxes' side. They managed to not only find a player to fill their spot, but it's none other than Bruce Wayne's newest addition." The camera shifted to Danny, who looked surprised by the sudden attention. The lost son seems to have found his way right in the ice rink. Some of Danny's teammates jostled him teasingly and tried to get themselves in front of the uninterested camera. Tim and the others could hear Danny's teammates while the announcers talked and got the crowd invested in the game. "We'll show that jackass," one of the boys hissed angrily after the camera left. "We're not going to let that deserter win. Not even 1 point." The others made sounds of agreement. They must have been talking about their ex-teammate. His leaving must not have been amicable then. "You gotta play twice as hard, Wayne." "Yeah, show them what you're made of." "All right." Danny laughed along easily. "Oh, look, Ethan." Tim could see one of the boys, Levi Evans, pointing to somewhere on the stands. Ethan looked in the direction and waved at an older woman and a girl in the stands. "Crazy that they could make it," a boy from before spoke. His words pointed to what may or may not be our biggest game yet. "Benji, let it go," Danny said, annoyed in a way that made it clear they had discussed this before. "I just think it's pretty crazy how all of them just had a perfectly crafted excuse to not come." Benjamin Henderson said gruffly. The look of guilt that was plastered on all their faces as they listened to the conversation didn't seem like enough retribution. "Even after you literally asked them, too," Liam Hartman piped in. "You guys are more pressed about it than I am." Danny laughed dryly. "Besides, it's not like I actually expected them to show up, anyway." A gut punch, but well-deserved. "Dude, who hurt you?" "Them, apparently." The announcers concluded the introductions with, "And without any further ado," at the cue, the camera panned over the crowd to get their reaction, coincidentally gliding right in front of the full house of Waynes. "Was that the Waynes?" The announcer's voice shifted into pure shock, forgetting whatever he was about to say. At the words, Danny's head turned to look at the big screen, and, from his seat, Tim could see a genuine shock on his face. As Danny turned to scan the crowd, his eyes snapped to Bruce and Dick, then to the others. The announcer cleared his throat. "Well, let's get this game started, then." "Surprise?" Ethan Hudson laughed lightly. They couldn't see Danny's reaction since he turned around, with the beeper signaling the start of the game. The coach instructed the first batch onto the ice, and Danny and a few of his teammates headed through the gate and onto the ice. The game started off like any other, and the Waynes made sure to show their favorite player their support. Number 71 from the Wolves was always on Danny's tail, which Tim thought was strange since he was an offensive player like Danny. He chalked it up to a strategy the other team was using, since 71 seemed much larger and bigger than Danny. It didn't pose too much of a problem, with Danny easily managing to outmaneuver him. As the timer ticked, number 71's plays only seemed to get more and more aggressive and targeted. Tim only noticed the build-up in hindsight. 71 had the puck and was surrounded by the Foxes, ready to steal the puck from him and intercept the pass. From Tim's spot, he calculated that the safest pass would likely be the Wolves' 53, since he was the least guarded, while Danny was squarely blocking the third offensive player. The Foxes had every direction covered, watching the Wolves like prey. 71 took the shot, but he didn't aim for 53 or any of the other Wolves. With what might have been a show of skill in any other context, the puck landed squarely and hard at Danny's face, just under the opening of his visor, hard enough that it took down the wolf behind Danny down with him. The referee was quick to step in, stopping the game. Danny's team was outraged, the ones in the stands throwing curses and threats, while the ones on the ice were actively being held back by people in uniform. 71 looked down at the stunned Danny with a mocking smile, clearly proud of himself despite the penalty. The hit had made direct contact with his nose. The announcers expressed their shock at both teams and made to return to their benches and clear the ice. The Foxes' coach met Danny right in front of the team benches and talked to him while the medic made his way over. The whole line of off-duty vigilantes watched in a quiet anger, knowing there wasn't much of any of them could do. Most had just taken to yelling curses and threats, Jason and Dick, while others took to quietly plotting the demise of 71's entire lineage, Steph and Tim. They listened closely to what Danny said to the coach and medic. "I'm fine, really." He sounded more exasperated than anything. "Your nose is clearly broken," the coach insisted. "You don't have to blood to spare to bleed like that either, kid." "Sit down so I can take a look at it. It'll probably need a stint." the medic said, and there was some shuffling. "You're going to put me back out there," Danny insisted, "right?" There was a pause. "Let's see how bad it is first." "Pretty sure I heard a crack," Samuel Hess said despairingly, sounding worried. "Shut up," Noah Skinner hissed. "Sorry." "This will need an x-ray, but I suspect at least mild fracturing. Danny, I need you to come to the on-site exam room with me." "No, really, it doesn't even hurt that bad." Danny tried again. "You can't play with a fractured nose, Danny," the coach said firmly. The other boys listened with a hushed whispering Tim couldn't catch. "And let me reiterate, you don't have the blood to spare for an injury like this." The lack of pains from the adrenaline rush. Danny didn't say anything, and Tim watched from the cameras as Danny was led away from the bench by the medic. "You can leave your gear here for now." Danny handed his gloves to the coach, his stick still by the bench where he had been sitting. "Your helmet," the coach reminded Danny as he was about to leave. The camera caught the slight anger glowering on his face as he threw his helmet hard against the back barrier of the benches, the people behind it flinching back hard at the loud impact. The impact left the comms with a light static. The announcers were chattering away in their mics, and the crowd was joining in at the moment the internet would definitely sink its claws into soon enough. "He's pissed," Theodore Velasquez whispered. "Obviously. Well, I mean, I've just never seen Danny pissed," Theodore said. "I'm glad that I'm not the one that pissed him off." "Nose goes for whoever tells him to turn the cold off," Ethan mumbled. "It's not even that cold. You're literally shivering, Noah." "No, I'm not." "Are you going to let him play again, Coach?" Asher McGinns asked. "I don't have a choice now, do I?" There was an edge of eagerness in his tone. The game continued despite Danny's absence. Bruce, Duke, and Dick had gone to see Danny in the infirmary, while the rest of them watched the match and promised updates. By the time Danny had returned to the game, nose clearly splinted and bandaged, the Foxes had managed to score 1 point for a 1-0 scoreboard. The coach's earlier reservation about letting Danny play again was easily countered after his return. By the end of the match, they won a blistering 3-0, both of the others earned by Danny with a point to prove. The crowd loved it, and the Wolves' absolute defeat gave Tim a little satisfaction. Only little, though. After the game, Jason, Dick, and Tim hung back while the others went to suit up, the unexpected turn of events in the game messing with the original plan. They would join him after a quick congratulations. When they got down to where both teams were flittering off the ice, casually conversing amongst themselves about whatever was reasonable to speak about after a match. 71, it seemed, had not been able to take out all of whatever vendetta he had against Danny on the ice. And while Danny's back was still turned to him, and none of the Foxes were paying the Wolves much mind, he aimed a full-fisted punch at Danny's head. Jason, Dick, and Tim had all noticed just as 71's plan was launched into action, but were too far to be able to intercede without their gear, so there was nothing they could do but watch. Watch as Danny moved his head clear out of the way, circling back to punch 71 square in the jaw with a nasty uppercut. 71 stumbled back in shock, and from the force of the impact, a bruise blistering on his chin now. Danny grabbed him by the collar of his jersey and dragged him down from the notable height difference to have them nose to broken nose. "If you wanted to fight, you could have just asked," Danny said, voice dripping in a vicious sort of anger. And Tim saw the Danny that was Talia's first son, the one who, if it were known he was still alive, might have been the heir to the demon head instead of Damien. "Replacement," 71 spat in Danny's face, despite the hesitancy in his eyes. Danny let go in disgust, but before he could react, his teammate, Benjamin Henderson, stepped up, pushing 71 out of Danny's face. "You have no right to say that, deserter." "Benji," 71 startled. "You're seriously defending him?" "Don't call me that like we're friends," Benjamin snapped back. "We're not." The Wolves and Foxes both watched the interaction, waiting for their sign to jump in. 71 looked like he was going to say something else, but he saw the three had made their way right behind the foxes, and even if Tim wasn't as physically intimidating as some of the players, anyone would think twice before leaping into a fight with Jason and Dick. 71, understanding he couldn't win, even with the other wolves willing to step in, took a resigned, retreating step. He looked at Danny, blue-gray eyes stormy with rage. "Freak," he muttered. Tim saw Danny's shoulder twitch at the word, a reaction so small he almost missed it. Dick already held Jason from getting back into a fight with a volley of kids much younger than him, but Tim didn't hold the same reservations. Jason was not far behind as the other players moved into action, Tim landing a punch square in 71's jaw, rewarding a satisfying crack seconds before the other teenagers mixed into the fray. This concludes Part 4 of Chapter 22 of Regular Boy Daniel Wayne, or Chapter 21, depending on how you count, I guess. But that leads me to my little announcement. I've recently been made aware that I have been reading the wrong version of the story. Not anything major, just some changes that the author made that I wasn't privy to because I had downloaded a older version about a year ago, and I didn't know that they had added stuff and taken stuff away. We talked it out. It's all good. I'm just going to be recording the newer version from now on, and I'm not going to re-record any of the older stuff, though. So if you are reading through the story while listening to it and see slight inconsistencies, that's why. It shouldn't be anything too crazy, though. That all being said, I'm excited to continue this story with you guys, and I hope you've all enjoyed it so far, and thank you so much for listening.